All right, good morning. It's top of the hour. I'd like to welcome everybody to our 18th episode of our 20 for 2020 webinars. Today's topic is knowing NFIRS inside and out. We're going to cover some challenges that many people face when filling out an NFIRS report, talk about NFIRS in general, and also reference NFPA 901 today. We'll get into that here momentarily. So I want to welcome all of you again. I know you're very busy in your organizations, taking care of both your troops and the crews and your communities during this challenging time. So I'm grateful that you are carving out an hour of your day to spend with me here, and hopefully you'll find this very worthwhile. So here's our plan. We're going to do a quick introduction. I've got a couple poll questions, both related to just kind of getting to know some of you a little bit better, as well as some NFIRS related questions as well, some sort of pop quizzes that we'll throw out there. We'll cover our objective, and then depending on how many potential people that we have that are potential customers that are looking to join the emergency reporting family, that'll determine how much time we spend on a little background on who we are and our system features. So with that, I'm going to throw down the first poll question. If at any point you have any issues with the video or the audio, just put something in the questions to let me know. I think we are good to go. GoToMeeting is being heavily used, and so we want to make sure everything's good on your end. So for the first poll, are you interested in joining the ER family, or are you a current ER customer? All right. Wow. All right, keep voting. We got about half of you voting. Seeing the results get tallied in here. All right, a little more than half of you have voted. If you're multitasking, that's okay, but just look up and vote. Closing the poll on 3, 2, 1. Last chance. Here we go. Hey, this is most interesting today. First time ever we've cracked 30% that are potentially interested in joining the ER family. So I will spend just a few minutes covering a little bit who we are and what the features that we have in the system. And those of you that are current customers, you'll get a lot out of the whole presentation today. So hang tight. You probably know a lot about the system already. So excellent. This is great. In the next poll, what type of agency do you work for? Are you career department, volunteer, combo, or federal DoD? That's strange, Andrew. You should be able to vote. It says can't vote, said poll in progress for attendees only. You're definitely an attendee. Very odd. Well, if anybody else is getting that, but we're getting almost everybody voting. Sorry about that, Andrew. I'm not sure what's going on there. All right, going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1, and we have a terrific mix today. So we've got career, about a third of you, half volunteer, and about a 10th or so combo. So welcome, everybody. Good mix today. All right, the next poll questions will be related to NFIRS, and they'll be more like pop quizzes as we go through the presentation today. That's me. I'll be your tour guide here for the next hour. My name is Tom Lewis. I'm the Business Development Analyst with Emergency Reporting. Been using the system since 2004. Became a part-time trainer in 2011, full-time for Department of Defense and International in 2013 when I retired from my fire department, and then promoted to my current position back in July of 2018. And it has been quite the ride these 9 years, and feel very privileged and frankly blessed to be part of such a good company. All right, so those of you that said that you are interested in joining the emergency reporting family, I just want to briefly cover some key things about us. On the right, you're going to see our 4 pillars, and these 4 pillars help support the whole organization. And again, this pertains to how we serve you. And so we've got compliance, and as you all know, we've got to comply with many standards, regulations, and things like that, and a lot of that is data driven. So we want to be able to help you manage that as best as possible. And then of course, day-to-day operations. Really, in emergency reporting, you could run your entire department on it. And we try to make that as easy as possible because we know those of you that joined us today are probably very interested in data. You're more of the data geeks in the department, and you help lead the organization. But the vast majority of us got into the job to take care of Mrs. Smith, put out the fires, get our run reports done, and get back to training, get back to running calls. And so we try to serve both as best as possible, getting the good data in and you can see down in the blue the data, getting the good data in so you can trust what's being put in by the troops so that you can analyze it, process it, and be able to make good decisions on trustworthy information. And so it all ties together, and we're constantly working to improve the system to make that easier for all of you. And then that really comes down to the yellow. That's where I feel like we are probably best in the business on building and keeping relationships with our customers, having open communication where you can request features, having a great support team that will respond promptly to you. Even when we get busy, we always get back to you. Sometimes it's not as fast, and we're used to running calls and that kind of instant gratification where things are kind of instant sometimes for us when we're running calls, but we do our best to get back to you as quickly as possible, and you'll, at the very least with our support team, get an automated response almost immediately, and then updates within 24 to 48 hours typically. So we have, we develop software using the Agile process, and without getting into all the details, we release every 2 weeks. We're actually looking into doing that even more frequently. We do have hot fixes, which means any bugs, critical features that need to be added, like our COVID special studies, those are done in hot fixes. But unlike running calls and getting back and doing the report, software is never finished. It's always a work in progress. And the nice thing with emergency reporting is that you don't have to install or manage anything. Whenever you log in, you are always using the latest version. Our uptime is 99.9% annually, which means we're down, less than 8 hours a year, and if that. All of our, as I mentioned earlier, our support team, but we're all US based. So when you talk to somebody, you're talking to somebody in Bellingham, Washington. That's where our home base is, and you will be able to understand everybody, and they are intimately familiar with the system, and they have a slew of resources there from our development team and so forth to help them answer your questions and solve any concerns with the system. Again, with compliance, we probably serve close to 23% of accredited agencies out there. There's 260 some of them right now. About 20 to 23% use emergency reporting. We're very strong in supporting ISO efforts, NFPA standards, and then any local, state, and federal standards and regulations that you have to comply with. And lastly, we're very proud to say that we serve the entire United States Marine Corps Fire and Emergency Services through an enterprise contract, and the United States Army Fire and Emergency Services as well. So things are looking really good. We're constantly growing. And speaking of growth, we're well over 7,000 departments worldwide, 36 million incident reports in the system, and then over 750,000 personnel in all of the accounts that we serve. We have 16 modules plus 3. There's 3 bonuses, I call them, within some of these modules, such as rig check and the daily log. And so, like I said, you can run your whole department on our system pretty much. Partner interfaces via API. So many of you have a really robust scheduling program, such as, say, Telestaff or Adashi, Roll Call, or NetDuty. And a lot of those staffing programs are full-blown staffing programs. That helps feed our daily roster so that then things will auto-populate, personnel will auto-populate in your daily log and for apparatus on incidents. And so it's a connection that we use called an API, Application Programming Interface. Think of it as computers talking to each other and exchanging data, either pushing or pulling data from each other. CAD interfaces, we serve nearly, let me rephrase that, we interface, not serve, interface with just about every CAD out there. And those of you that have one, my department didn't at first. We did about 5-6 years later, and it was a boon. We loved it because it reduced data entry error, and more importantly, data entry, equally important, data entry time for completing an incident report. We tested this out in one department, basically for a general bread and butter incident, not counting the EPCR, for a basic 321 NFIRS report. This particular department, their CAD pushed over all but 5 fields. And so the report writer just had to QA it, put in the 5 fields, do their narrative, and they were good to go. We have 600 system reports, analytics for 1710, 1720, and 1500, and we are building rapidly a very comprehensive business intelligence tool called BI Basic. There will be a BI Pro coming soon, and I'm happy to say for those of you that are looking to go to accreditation, 90th percentile is on its way. And I can say that because I know they're working on it, and it's getting close to being finished. All right, let's get into today's topic. So the objective for today: how can my department improve its NFIRS documentation so that we capture the correct information and reduce liability. And so I'm no lawyer, so we're not going to get into all the legal aspects, but one thing I will say is that by doing good documentation, if there is ever any litigation or depositions and you've got good documentation, it's going to reflect extremely well on your personnel and your organization. Just as if you had poor documentation, it kind of it allows people to think, well, if they didn't do that well, what else aren't they doing well? And that's what lawyers will exploit. Now, I like that. I never got deposed for anything during my career, but I imagine some of you that have joined us today have, and I'm sure it's not I know from experience from other members of my organization, it's not a pleasant experience. There's a lot of stress involved with that, but a lot of that stress can be reduced by great documentation. And so hopefully after today, you'll have some resources to do that even better in your organization. So you probably heard this. It was drilled into our head in paramedic school, but if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. And so I think good chiefs everywhere would agree with that. And so again, if part of your organization has an EMS mission, whether you're medics, EMTs, you know the importance of good PCR documentation. Well, I think good NFIRS documentation is just as important for all those calls that don't require direct patient contact. So we're going to go into some of that today. Okay, so I want to do a very brief introduction into NFPA 901, and I'll show you the link and how you can access it. If your department doesn't have an NFPA membership, I highly recommend it, only because it'll afford you access to these documents. Now, the nice thing is NFPA does provide a free access to these documents. You can't, search them, you can't print them, can't share them, but you can review them. And so I'll show you where to go to get that. And anytime you're looking to improve your organization, whether it is how you're going to check your trucks, how you're going to do incident reporting, how you're going to manage your PPE, chances are there's an NFPA standard for it, and that can serve as your guide to building a program. One thing I want to mention with these standards is it's very rare for any department to meet many of these standards, if not any of these standards, 100%. Think 1710, 1720. It's very difficult, but the key is you're striving to do better, and this is a document that will help you push towards excellence in improving elements of your department. And today we're going to focus on incident reporting, and NFPA 901 is your standard classifications for incident reporting and fire protection data. So I'm going to show you some excerpts from that, a little bit of text on the front end here, and then we'll jump into the system. But we're going to talk about what defines you, nothing but times, don't zone out, and build something great. All right, so the introduction, chapter 1, right out of the gate, 1.1. It defines the data elements, 901, and classifications used by many departments in the US and other countries to describe fire damage potential and experience during incidents. It provides a common language. So when you read this, it's going to be like a little class on NFIRS, because a lot of it is NFIRS based, frankly, the codes that they show in the document. But it's a good reference document to have whenever you have questions about completing incident reports. And what I want to do is mention right now, in the GoToWebinar control panel, all right, in the GoToWebinar control panel, whoops, all right, good, everybody can see my screen. I just thought I saw a message there. There are 5 handouts, okay? Now, you can feel free to download them. The 5 handouts include our learning plan for learning emergency reporting for administrators for NFIRS, incidents module, a learning plan for users for the NFIRS and incident module. Then we've got the NFIRS incident coding pocket guide from Oregon. It's just one example that a state put out. Ohio has one also, but if your state doesn't have one, maybe you could be the one that builds it for your state, and you can take a look at Oregon's. And then you've got the NFIRS coding questions, which has some really good questions about unique situations on how to properly code them in NFIRS. And then the last one is your NFIRS complete reference guide. That is really your reference doc for doing NFIRS reports. Now, I recommend to go ahead and download those and park them in your ER library. Maybe create a category called NFIRS docs or NFIRS documentation, and then you've got some great resources there that everybody in the department can access. All right, chapter 1. Next up, Now, I know there's a lot of text here, so I highlighted some key things. So report completion, we're going to come back to that in a little bit, but the report should be completed by the person who gathered the data. I know a lot of volunteer departments I visited and talked with over the years. A lot of times the crews will go out because they're working. They go from their job, they get called out, they go take care of Mrs. Smith, put out the fire, and then they go back either to work or back home. And then the chief actually does the incident report, but the chief was never there. Thankfully, with emergency reporting being web-based, you can go back home after the call and just knock out the report yourself. And that is the preferred way to do it as per this standard. And so every incident should be reported regardless of the type down here in 4.46. So regardless of the type or extent, that's the all hazards component of NFIRS. I can tell you, I will not name the city, but not too long ago, a city like early 2000s, late 1990s, they were just documenting fire incidents. They were missing out on so much. And a lot of the data that you're going to collect is going to be driven by, it's going to drive, not be driven by, but drive funding. And so you've got to tell your story and show what you're providing to the community. So they've since changed their procedures and everything's being documented now, thankfully. Okay, and an incident report must be clearly structured and uniform definitions and terminology. That to me, despite any NFIRS pitfalls and not being as updated as it should have been, and again, in my opinion, it's a good standard and it's still a national standard. Those of us that have to deal with NEMSIS, we know there's a national standard for EPCRs, but every state gets to kind of do what they want, so it makes it infinitely harder to manage that, at least for a company like us. And then, of course, within your state, you've got to make sure you're meeting what the state requires and not just what national. So thankfully, NFIRS is so far truly a national reporting system. Some times that you're going to include, and I'm bringing this up because NFIRS doesn't capture some of these times, and we are in the process of revamping our incident module, and we're very likely going to be adding some times that are not necessarily NFIRS times because there's so much data needing to be collected now. Discovery detection time, event start time, when water supply was established, when water was initially applied on the fire, when you had initial fire knockdown, fire control, fire out, loss stop, all of those benchmarks that NFIRS is not currently capturing. We think that that's part of the future in being able to capture some of those times to tell more of the story of a fire department's effectiveness. I'll let you take a look at that for just a second while I look at any questions. And Ryan, I will, with your web experience, I will be able to tell you what's being done to enhance it. You bet. So question is about the ER interface, and we'll get to that a little bit later. All right, one of the other things that we're very good at capturing is the demand zone, and that is something for community risk reduction, community analysis areas, and the geographical depiction of where your incidents are taking place. Now, in our system, the zones can be made a required field. If that has not been made a required field, I strongly recommend that you do, only because there are so many, probably 100-ish reports that for incidents that actually allow you to filter by zone. So if that's not been made a required field, I highly recommend it because you can filter both in the main incident grid, the reports I mentioned, and then also with the map view if you happen to have our map upgrade. And then the breakdown, again, I'm only putting this here because we're not, if we're not inspectors and we're not out in the prevention world directly, but you can see referenced here in 901, you've seen this before, and this is a great way to categorize your property use. And again, following a standard. So when in doubt on how to build some of the tables in our system, a lot of times NFPA standards can be your guide. Okay, so let's talk about narratives. So I've got these 5 things that we're going to talk about today. And then of course, we'll address questions as they come up. And I want to talk about first on narratives. So again, going back to completing a report, to describe the situation accurately, the report can be written in the person's own words. Now, one of these things that I like to bring up when it comes to narratives, we give you a choice in emergency reporting. You can have a narrative not required, so you can complete the incident report without having to do a narrative. All incident exposures are required to have at least one narrative for every apparatus. That's my preference. And then all incident exposures must have at least one CAD narrative. Excuse me. What that means, that third choice is the CAD can push over a narrative that is not editable. It's a read-only narrative that gets added to your incident report, but you have to at least do one more narrative for that incident to be completed. So you've got three choices. The reason I bring this up is a lot of the departments I'm working with, they're moving to this middle choice for accountability and going back to the standard in that person's own words. So maybe I'm assigned to ventilation. IC assigns me to ventilation. The IC is going to do his or her narrative about being in command, but then the person on the roof can actually describe exactly what his crew did and what they found. Now, they may report some of that over the radio, or they might verbalize it over to the IC after the incident, but you can truly document what that crew did, what that company did, by having their own separate narrative. Again, it's just my preference. Your agency may have some different thoughts about that, but I wanted to let you all know that within the administration module in our system, you can make that choice, one of these three choices. All right, here comes our first pop quiz here. All right, so according to NFIRS, whoops, actually, I scratched that. That's coming up next. That's going to be on mutual aid. So an exposure. All right, so I want to talk about what NFIRS calls an exposure. Sorry about that. What NFIRS calls an exposure. This is directly from the NFIRS Complete Reference Guide. So I was always, we're going to go pull a line and protect that exposure. So something that could catch on fire when we're managing the incident, or I'm going to be assigned to, the Bravo exposure. All right, for doing an incident report, an exposure is defined as a fire resulting from another fire outside that building, structure, or vehicle or fire that extends to something else. And so thankfully, you can tie multiple exposures to a single incident within our system. And I'll show you a couple other tricks that make filling that out much easier than it used to be. And so keep that definition in mind as you continue to enhance the quality of the NFIRS reports you're doing in your department. Okay, so here's a question for you. A vehicle catches fire on a parking ramp. Two other vehicles catch fire from the first vehicle. Are these two vehicles considered an exposure fire, or, as in the NFIRS Complete Reference Guide, should I treat similar items in a group as a single exposure, such as a fleet of cars? Now, I didn't put this out as a quiz, so you can answer to yourselves there on how you would document this. So again, parking ramp, parking garage, and you got a couple vehicles that catch fire from a single vehicle. So you've got three vehicles on fire. So is that one single group fire, or is it one fire with two exposures? So this is where you got to make a judgment call. So it's not always black and white. If the car is on the ramp or in a general parking facility and they have separate owners, treat them as a separate vehicle fire exposure. If it's a fleet of vehicles, say a rental car lot, and they're involved and they have the same corporate owner, they may be treated as a single exposure. So kind of interesting there. And I brought this one up because, again, it's not always just yes, no, black and white. It's going to require some judgment and some good QA on doing those incident reports. So if you don't have a QA process where somebody, whether a peer or someone of a higher rank, is doing the review of these reports, might not be a bad thing to start considering. I know in our department, we'd allow our EMTs to basic incident lift assist. We'd let them get practice using the RMS and doing an incident report, but then someone, be it their company officer or battalion chief, would then review the quality of that report. Interesting, no? All right, so on an exposure, and again in the system, we won't have time to go in and do a full-on report, but I wanted to let you know this did not used to always be here. All right, it's a relatively new feature in the past couple of years. So if you haven't had to do an exposure report, the nice thing is when you have to do an exposure, when you get to basic 4, that dreaded list of units and times, if you have a CAD interface, all of the unit times and the units will populate on the primary exposure 0, okay? Now exposures 1 and subsequent exposures 2, 3, and so forth, the CAD's not populating that. But you can take all of those units from exposure 0 and pick the ones that apply to subsequent exposures, and it will auto-populate those times. Now you can certainly adjust that, add or remove units manually and adjust their times if there's a need to adjust those times. But this prevents that tedious manual entry of units and times and dates. So I just wanted to let you know that here, when you get to an exposure, we'll ask you if you want to copy apparatus, and then you get to choose which apparatus you wish to copy into that subsequent exposure. All right, here comes a poll question. Here we go. So according to NFIRS, what must occur for an incident to be considered a mutual or automatic aid call? Only the department must be at the incident, the department must be covering at the receiving department, or both the giving and receiving departments must be at the scene. So let's see how good we are, and give you a few seconds to think that one through and then go ahead and answer for me. And think it through, and don't feel bad if you don't get it right, because no one ever taught me this. I learned it after I left the fire service, believe it or not, because we would always think, oh, we're covering another department, we roll into their station, we're taking calls for them. Man, we're giving mutual aid, right? Well, we'll see. All right, only about half of you have voted. Go ahead and commit. All right, almost done. Gonna close it in 3, 2, 1. Last chance. Pick one. Almost everybody's voted. Few more. All right, closing the poll. Share results. Okay, some good responses here. So about a third, only the giving department must be at the incident. The giving department must be covering, or both the giving and receiving departments must be at the scene. All right, let's see who's right here. Oops, did I go too fast? No, perfect. All right, here's direct from the coding questions that I sent you in the handouts. So 2 conditions have to be true for a department to record in NFIRS that aid is given or received. That involves, the aid involves another fire department and both departments are at the incident, right? So like I said, I was doing it wrong for years, per NFIRS anyway. And so I'll let you look at some of those bullet points here for just a few seconds, but it's in the handout that I provided you, but it gives you some examples. So if a department is called to assist in another department but gets canceled before arriving, no aid is received because both fire departments are not at an incident. And there's ways to correctly document all of that. The last bullet is, the last bullet is most interesting. If you're filling in, you respond to a vehicle fire, no aid is given because the department is covering becomes a resource of that other department. We'll call that department B. Only one department is at the incident. The department that is filling in completes only one NFIRS report during its FDID, during its stay at the other departments, a cover assignment type 571. All incidents during the cover assignment are recorded under the other department's FDID. Now I will probably get, well, chastised by NFIRS by this next comment, but I'm a fire chief. I want to know and have in my RMS every call that my guys go on, period. So this could provide difficult in the sense that, all right, I'm the one giving the aid in this case. Well, I guess technically not per definition, but I'm responding in that other jurisdiction. I'm the only unit there, and I take care of that call. Says I should be, if I'm covering, it's a 571, but I'm fairly confident that most chiefs will want to know what calls you ran, and think of the chief that you're the chief that you're running the call for, that his agency. He's going to want to know calls that took place in his jurisdiction. Now the FDID can kind of cover it. However, it's kind of difficult even if you're using emergency reporting, a single RMS, both of you, to be able to correctly document it, because both agencies are going to want to know calls they either missed because they were out on other traffic, and then the agency that did the traffic, even though it wasn't in their first due, they want to be able to capture that, and most importantly, any potential exposures that took place, not structural or car exposed vehicle exposures, but personal exposures to carcinogens, atypically stressful events. So I'm an advocate that sometimes you might have to double enter when I say both entities have to document that report, and there's ways to do it, but keep in mind, for statistically, NFIRS will get 2 incident reports for that same incident. But again, sometimes I default to local needs and data collection at the local level. So I think any future version of NFIRS may be able to adjust this and make the reporting a little bit easier when one agency is running a call for another and they're not both the incident. But I'd love to hear if you have any comments or thoughts on that. Definitely send that into the questions, and I'll share it with the group today on how you're doing that, managing it, or any experience that you've had. I certainly welcome that and would be glad to share it with others here on the call today. Just remember here, when you give or receive aid, it's a required field, it defaults to none. You'll want to document that. And what's nice is if it's truly aid given, aid received, both units were on the scene, with our agency friends, you can tie those 2 incidents together. So that documentation is beautiful, because then when it's exported to NFIRS, it will see that as linked incidents and will treat it as a single fire or a single motor vehicle collision or whatever it might be, because both units were on scene and you document it accordingly. Because when you document it, NFIRS wants that FDID, the state, and the incident number of that agency that you gave aid to. And by being agency friends, which is set up in the administration module, those incidents are tied together right away, and you'll be able to see the units that gave you aid and their times, okay? And then if you gave aid, you'll be able to put, with a couple clicks, the unit, that agency's FDID, and of course you'll know the state easily, but their incident number without having to call them up or call dispatch to get that information. So that's in our agency friends, and that's one of the most powerful components of sharing data. And again, even when you share data, you cannot edit anything in that neighboring agency's account. It is simply read only, and in this particular part of agency friends, it's a linking of incidents. All right, one other poll question. So the big one. So what do you think about this? Another common misconception with NFIRS on how you document. So let's say you respond to a gasoline tanker into a building. It ignites both the tanker and the building. You have 5 total patients. What's the incident type you should use to enter this? Is it a building fire, a 322 motor vehicle accident with injuries, a 411, gasoline or other flammable liquid spill hazmat call, or a 900 special type of incident other? And this one is a pretty good get you here. Gotcha. All right, good. Everybody's voting. Think it through. I'll give you a few more seconds. Maybe you have experience on this one. Oh, awesome. Keep voting. I'm going to close it in 3, 2, 1. Make a commitment. All right. Let's take a look. Okay, so more than the third say a building fire. Third say a motor vehicle accident. Some say a hazmat, and some say a special type of incident. So again, I know what you're all probably thinking. Those of you that said the 411 are going to go with, well, what started the incident? Or 322, it was a collision. What started it? Well, that's what we should put down. Or it's a 411 because it's a hazmat call. Okay, and then because it's multiple, I bet you guys that did the 900 say, well, it's a multiple type incident. Let's do a 900. So what does NFIRS say? Whoops. Okay, so I get to just talk about it. But bottom line is, NFIRS says whatever the lowest number in the incident type set is the number that you use. In a lot of ways, it makes sense. Why? Because if you picked a 321, you wouldn't be able to open up the structure fire module. So Anytime there's a fire involved, even if something else caused it, it's always going to be a 100 series incident. And then you tack on hazardous materials was released, and then the hazmat module will open for NFIRS. You have a patient, the patient care module, the PCR will open up. And so having the lowest number allows you to capture the most information about that incident. Whereas with the fire, if you selected anything else, you would not be able to open up those other modules where you need to collect essential data about the incident. So keep that in mind. You can have a good training session within your own department. So again, we are kind of quarantining ourselves to some level, but I'm sure there's more computer-based training taking place in our stations than before. And so I'm going to show you too here when we get out of the PowerPoint an opportunity for people in your department to become even better experts in NFIRS. Okay, so losses. So this is also something that 901 recommends you document. Data element monetary loss measures the monetary loss associated with an incident, so forth and so on. So one thing I want to talk about here is this. Accreditation and telling your story in general, whether you are going for accreditation or not, we want to talk more about what's saved. Okay, and so we have a report in the system that doesn't just show losses, but also shows you a save column, which is something more worth celebrating when you can see how much a lot of you are saving compared to the value of properties that you're responding to. So we'll look at that here in a little bit. One of the things too that is relatively new in the last couple of years is that you can now, maybe even the past year actually, in admin, under required fields and customizations, you can make the property content loss for 100 series required, which means if you select any 100 series incident, you will have to put in the property and contents loss. Now, this is not required, the pre-incident value, but I highly recommend that you put that in. And a question I always get, and you're probably asking it now, well, I don't know it, okay? That's okay. Estimate it, have your PIO estimated, have your chief officer estimated. You can go to the assessor's office, just at least get a ballpark. You can always update it later when you get more information, say from the insurance company, or say you do go to the assessor's office later on their website to get that information, but try to be as accurate as you can. Contents, someone gave me kind of a formula that they use for roughly estimating contents to stay consistent with their organization. I'd have to dig that out, but that's always helpful too, and very difficult to assess. But you want to get that in there because it's telling your story to your decision makers on the effectiveness of your organization. Okay, now let's get into some things in the system, and I'm going to get out of this deck and I want to look and see what we've got for questions. So stand by as the screen refreshes here. Bring over my control panel. Go to the system and let's tackle some questions right now. We got a few of those. Andrew, I am so sorry about you not being able to vote. I have no idea why you can't. Mutual aid, yeah, mind blown is right. Ryan, good. Yeah, I was like, oh, it kind of sucks when you get shown how you've been doing it wrong for so many years, and I can attest to that. Robert says, if you do not complete a report for a call you responded to while covering, the information will never be correctly documented because the company you were covering did not go on the call. Yeah, and that's, I've always thought, and again, without going too into the weeds here on that one, Robert, so if you went on the call for your neighboring agency, I would always like to document it in my FDID in my department. Now, I know NFIRS, if they're listening, they're going to scold me, but again, I want my chief and my organization to know where we went, what we did, who was exposed, and then that neighboring agency could certainly, that they didn't go, if there's good communication, they could put that they were canceled, all right, and then document in the narrative that no units were available so that that chief will know, hey, how often did we get calls that we couldn't go because we were busy on other calls? It's a tough one, again, to stay true to NFIRS. But again, from a local perspective, I can always explain, there's no NFIRS police that I know of, but again, from a local perspective, I want to capture that. So if you have any other thoughts on that, please share them. Mike says, I think it's vital to document cover assignment as well as every incident you handle during that incident. I'm with you on that one, Mike. I truly believe that as well. Again, I go back to my, keeping everybody safe and documenting exposures. Now, you're not exposed on every call. You're not running every single call as a fire call, but again, you still want to be able to document that. Silas says, so my city department is contracted to provide rescue services by local county commissioners for the whole county which is normally covered by another jurisdiction. So is this an aid or auto aid or just a normal run report for us? So you're contracted to provide rescue services. I say the word contracted by makes me think that it is not aid given at all. You're basically an agent of that entity, that whole county. And so I don't think it's aid or auto aid, but I'm certainly open to other opinions. Also important to note from Sean, to note that NFIRS states that you document what you find, not what you were dispatched for. That is true, very true, and for EMS especially. Again, 321 is your EMS, but certainly if you get dispatched for a motor vehicle collision and you get there and it's a pedestrian struck, that's a different NFIRS code. You want to put that in there for your incident type. That's exactly right. Great point. Oh, these are popping up questions like crazy. Awesome. You cannot vote while in full screen mode. Exit out of full screen mode to vote in the polls. Oh, okay. That's what people, I thought you were telling me to exit out of full screen mode. Yeah, don't be in full screen mode when you're viewing me, viewing GoToMeeting. Make sure you're reduced down. Great point. Okay, so great point. So it's not, I saw that. I'm like, I can't get out of, I need to be in full screen mode. So somebody had mentioned that. So great. Thanks, Brian, for sharing that with everybody. Some are probably realizing we entered data correctly in the past. Can or should we return to the previous incident to correct that data? Okay, Ryan, so I'm going to leave that up to each agency. The answer, you cannot bulk edit incident reports. You can unlock an incident report that has already been submitted to NFIRS, make any appropriate changes, and then there'll be a checkbox that asks you, do you wish to be able to resubmit this report to NFIRS? So on an incident by incident basis, if there's value and you think it's important to do that, then I would say go for it. It is not hard to do. Just know that you have to have sufficient privileges within the system to be able to do that. Not everybody can do that. +1 codes from James. We have a +1 code dispatched unable to respond for calls we are not able to respond due to no one available. That's excellent. And for our system, that would have to be a custom question, of which there are many good reports that you can extract that data from to show how often that occurred. Excellent point. Oh, I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Mike, I'm going to put this in the chat. So check this out, everybody. In the chat, thanks to Mike Vogt, you're going to get a link that talks about calculating fire loss. And he looked that up fast. So check the chat. Here it comes. Bookmark this page. I know I will learn something. All right. So I just put that in the chat for everybody. Thank you, Mike. And there's an IC safe document as well. That's coming. Ooh, this is the kind of participation I'm looking for. Fantastic. Okay, 2 links from Mike, everybody. I will look at those too. In fact, I want to open them up. Won't take our time today to look at it, but definition of fire loss. Just look. Oh, there it is. Total square footage. Anyway, good stuff here, guys. I learned something new every day, and this will help you stay consistent. And if someone asks you, where did you get it from? It'll be thanks to Mike showing us the calculating fire loss on an NFIRS gram. That's a good one to subscribe to, by the way, if you haven't subscribed to it. I'm sure that either was an older one or I just missed it along the way. All right, I want to make sure we hit these questions. Time flies here, but Silas, you're welcome. Andrew, you're welcome. Mike's got our determining fire loss, another one. Holy cow, this guy's on fire. Okay, here comes one more, and then we'll get back to the presentation and show you a couple other things here in the system, but I love sharing information. Do you know when or if NFIRS will be doing an update to the current rules for entering reports? So that would be a little bit of a philosophical discussion because I'm a big fan of NFIRS. I think if they pump some money into it, the feds, they could turn it into like from good to great. And I have heard that they're not doing anything in the near term of substance to change NFIRS. So a lot of it is going to be reliant upon RMSs like us following NFPA 901, looking at what other standards are out there that on data points that are being collected. Hopefully things will change and things will advance there because for all its faults, I think it's a great system and there's a lot of opportunity to enhance it. Mike says, I had to do a lot of research on loss. That's why I had it all. That's all right. We're grateful you shared it with all of us. All right, Robert, let's see. We utilize these documents shared for fire loss, but I usually will try and call the insurance company to see how much they paid out. Now that's some effort there, and that's follow up, right? And we're not always the best at that, but I think if you did that, that will supplement any other. If you can maybe document a narrative based it on the NFPA formula, or not, I'm sorry, the United States Fire Administration formula, or followed up with the insurance company or assessor's office and so forth. Yep, that is right, Andrew. And I'll echo that. Dr. O'Neill did mention that there's no changes or plan for NFIRS in the future. So what fire company data, personnel records, et cetera, can NFIRS access from the ER platform? So Ryan, so when you say what NFIRS can access, you'll have to, is it when you send it to NFIRS, what they get, or is it what can be populated within an NFIRS report? So maybe a little more clarity there, and probably, oh, personal information. Yeah, all that NFIRS gets, great question. So all that NFIRS gets on the export, or if you ship it to your state, is going to be who was on the scene, right? The personnel, the unit that they were on, but no personal information. They do not get a demographic data set about your personnel. And fantastic Type 100 guide with photos shared in the ER community. Here's another link. This is in our ER community from Sean. Resources galore, guys. And this is where the fact that you're so engaged today tells me that you want to be your local experts for this and you want to get it right for your department. So I'm really impressed to see what's going on here. Apparatus section, you may have gone over this already from James. The include mutual aid resources, yes or no. Do you know the difference between yes or no? And do we record all mutual aid apparatus on our NFIRS report? Yes, you should record all mutual aid apparatus on your NFIRS report. And the include mutual aid resources, yes or no? I gotta go look for that. So do me a favor, shoot me an email and I'll get you an answer offline on that one because I want to make sure I get it right. Okay, that answers all the questions and all of the resources you guys have shared. I'm grateful to you for doing all of that. The last one that was the last couple that were sent were this one. Assessment, My Home Safety Plan Fire Damage Assessment Calculator. I have never seen this one, so that's cool. And then here in ER, you're gonna have to log in to the support center. And yeah, this one I think is from Pigeon Forge for 100 series. Is what you meant? So yeah, good stuff. Chris shared it with us. I remember Chris, he's a sharp guy. Anyway, take advantage of these resources. Good stuff. Okay, to conclude here, I want to just go through a few things in the system just to show you. In admin, don't forget, and again, those of you that aren't customers, this is some of the configurations that you'll encounter. Required fields and customizations, there's a lot here, but pertaining to the NFIRS report, on basic page, required fields. I'm a big fan of what's checked here. All right, if you're a volunteer department and you want to capture population density, then you'll want to check that one. Okay, and so zone, making it required. These fields are not typically required by NFIRS, but as an agency, you can make them required. Excuse me, we all know why basic 4 should be required, right? Basic 4 en route time. If you don't have that time in there and say the CAD doesn't send it, and hopefully they do, and in this case you're good. But if you have to manually enter it, if it's not a required field, what do us firefighters do? We move on. We just do what we've got to do. This one ensures that you capture the en route because the time of dispatch to time of en route is what? I heard you all say it, turnout time. Okay, so that's for the NFIRS part of it. Here's where your incident narrative settings are. And last but not least, to supplement what you're collecting for NFIRS, this is not, repeat, not exported to NFIRS. This is for local data collection only. These are your custom questions or your user-defined fields. Take advantage of these. We have terrific reports from high-level look down to the details for each incident on these custom questions. Okay, a couple other things we're going to look at. How to do exposures. And let's see if I can remember the right fire. Okay, all time. I had a structure fire in here that was very detailed that I want to share with you all. Whoops, not that one. So we'll do this one anyway. So if I go here, if I give aid, one thing that changes, and you can see because I picked the 100, 111, but it had mutual aid was given, and there was a hazmat release, but look what happened. All those fire and hazmat modules are gone. Why is that? Well, I gave aid, and that person, the agency that I gave aid to, because there is another department at the scene, they've got to do all of those fields. Okay, so that's a key trigger here when you give aid. That if it's a fire call, that agency you gave aid to is responsible for all of the detailed information on the fire side of things. It doesn't mean you're not going to document what your crews did here, both in basic 4 and in the narrative, but the responsibility for all those submodules are theirs. Now, I wanted to document any civilian casualties. That should be theirs also, but I checked it and it gave it to me. My casualties, if I have any, and any patients I took care of. Okay, and then any persons involved. Now, on page 5, one thing you'll notice when you give aid, it's going to ask you for the FDID, their state, and their incident number. If you have agency friends, you'll click on this, and if there are any of all your friended agencies, if there are any incidents that they ran that day, you pick the one that you gave aid to, and it autofills those 3 fields. Now, if you received aid, here's the difference, and the calls are linked. Say it was mutual aid received. Okay, now I'm responsible for all this. And then on basic 5, what will happen is when they fill in their units, they'll be, whoops, not here, not basic 5, basic 4. Down at the bottom in a read-only format will be a list of their apparatus. Now, they have to fill out their incident basic 4 for it to populate here, but it ties those incidents together in the database and you'll be able to see it. It'll be on black text and read-only. So I just wanted to show you that for documenting. And then the last thing I want to show you is when you add a new exposure. Okay, so say it was a 111, but then we had a vehicle fire. All right, you're going to go through and do it like a normal fire report, but the key that makes life better is right here. Copy apparatus. I'm going to bring these 3 units over from exposure 0, copy, and then if I need to make any edits, I can. But here they are, and then I can go forth and finish it all up. Because it's no fun manually entering all of this. And imagine if you had a dozen or more units on the scene on a big incident. So keep that one in mind. And then where the zone is on page 3, I made it a required field. These are built in your administration module, and you create the incident zones, and it can be your battalions, it can be map pages, it can be city council wards, whatever you use to geographically isolate incidents in your system, because it allows you to run reports against it. So we'll show you, actually we'll go to this first. You can do an advanced search and show on a map just the zone you want to show for incidents, and then better still, on reports, if I just do a keyword search zone, now it will capture hydrant zones, reports for hydrant zones and reports for occupancy zones, but of these 91, the vast majority of them, when you look at the little icon here, that's a little gumball code 3 light, all of those are for incidents. So the vast majority of these 91 are reports that extract data related to incidents, related to zones. Okay, a couple other reports before we close out today. 1, 968, I'm in a demo account, so who knows what I'm going to get here. But this particular report, nothing. Let's go back a little. Let's go back a few years if I get lucky here. Okay, so the reports have to be reviewed first of all, but one of the things we've added to this report is a column called saved. So it's going to show you the pre-incident value, the losses, but then what was saved. And so you're able to tell your story. Maybe you'd even do a chart, extract this out using the text download or Excel. Use the text download because that's the raw data. This has merged cells and colors and all that. So text download for working with the data. And then keep in mind a little trick here. We're doing our best, but most reports in the system, if you're wondering where it's collecting the data from and what parameters are required or where it's coming from, it's going to be in this little yellow footer box. And so pre-incident value and losses, summation of respective property and contents recorded on basic 5, only reviewed incidents. EMS incidents are excluded. Okay, that's 968. So now we're going to move into something that I want to ask you a question on. Here's a poll, and we're almost done, so I'm grateful for you guys staying with me here. So question number 1. Have you been documenting the United States Fire Administration National Fire Data Center COVID Special Study? All right, good voting here. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to show you how to do this because this is pretty important. We're kind of living through historic times, but I mean, we'll look back on this and I guess tell our grandkids what we were doing and how we were taking care of our communities. All right, closing the poll. 3, 2, 1, last chance to vote, guys. Just about half of you voting. There we go. All right. All right, great. So most of you are, some of you aren't, and then some of you, what the heck is this? Is a special study? All right, so I'm going to show you, first of all, I'm going to show you where to document it, and then we'll come back to this report. Document. Why does this matter? I will show you. I don't think I pulled that link up, but I'll do it now. COVID NFIRS. So I'll put this link in the chat for y'all. And you're going to see here, it's a special study. So this is a nationally collected data set, just like when you submit your NFIRS report, it's going to be part of that export to NFIRS now. Okay. And so it talks about what that study is, and it goes out on the transaction field called 1060. That if you looked at the export, it's in row 1060. Okay. And so let me put that in there so you can, if you're not doing it, you can kind of look into how and why you should be doing it. Okay. And so we have that built into our system, so you don't have to worry about doing a custom question. And well, custom questions won't go to NFIRS. That's why we did that. Okay. Now the report that you can extract is this one, 1795. Okay. And I've seen some live accounts, and they've done an incredibly great job with it. I don't know if we have any completed reports in this. Yes, we do. So it'll show you the incident number, the address, the zone, and the special studies, and then the total count for each of those responses. So this is for internal documentation, okay? It'll go out on your NFIRS export, and we're at the top of the hour. Holy cow, time flies when we're having fun. Okay, another report. This is brand new. We believe we're the first in the business to do this, where you can basically, for FEMA reimbursement, okay, because they have I don't have it, but there's another link that you can get reimbursed with these declarations of emergency being declared by states. And so I can basically run well, you run it per day typically. That's what our customers have been doing. So we're going to go yesterday. Now I won't have anything here, but what I want to tell you is it's going to auto-populate a lot of these fields. This is the first report in our system that is not that ER format where it's got your logo on the top and the colors and everything. This is an actual form that you can fill out and submit directly to FEMA or document, when you're going to go for reimbursement. What the key here is, it populates everything from the daily log for the dates given into the activity log. And so what I want to share with you is the link. It's a 3-minute video that you can see how this all works. There's a step you got to do to take it out into Adobe Reader for filling and signing it, but it's super easy. Okay, and I'm going to give you this link to look at it right now. Again, it's only 3 minutes of your time, but if you are thinking of getting reimbursed for just about anything that they're saying you can get reimbursed for, and it's on their website, the FEMA website, you can quickly fill out this form because that's part of what they're asking for. So that link is in the chat. And I want to close out here. We're at the top of the hour. That's good. That's good. Good. Okay, last thing, NFIRS experts out there. All right, when you go to the United States Fire Administration's website, go search for courses, search by NFIRS. All right, they shut down the campus. So all the ones that are on campus can't do right now. This one here, Q0494, highly recommend you take this class. Is it exciting? No. Is it a how to put out fire, but it's how to cut up cars? No. But if you're going to be your local NFIRS expert, this is a nice certificate, a nice credential to have, and it's actually really informative. You can apply online and knock it out, online as a self-study course. Okay, that's coming over to in the chat. And with that, I think we're going to call it a wrap for today, but I'm going to answer questions. First of all, thank you again for participating. I hope you found this hour worthwhile and learned a little bit more about NFIRS, becoming even better and NFIRS incident report writers, and more importantly, sharing that knowledge with your troops. All right, any questions? My pleasure, Jim. You're very welcome. Do you know if this special study is something that must be manually created by each individual RMS system, or is there an NFIRS update that will load it in? Great question. We had our RMS manually make it. So now if you filled out NFIRS software that's just NFIRS based, it's there. If you're using another RMS like us, hopefully they have that in there as a special study question that you can answer. It's best if it's just embedded with your RMS and you can just answer it, make it a required field, hopefully, and then it gets shipped off to NFIRS during your normal NFIRS export, or if you submit to the state and then the state submits it to NFIRS. Mike, good point. So shoot me an email on that, on finding the reports that you need, and also on both general analytics as well. Just copy and paste what you sent me there, but send it to me in an email. My email is Tom, T-O-M, @emergencyreporting.com, and I'm happy to answer questions for you as best as possible. All right, Jim, Sean, and Robert, you're very welcome. Thank you, everybody. We're just past the top of the hour, and hope it was a good lesson for you, and continue to take good care of your people and your community, and stay safe, and we'll catch you again next week. So next week, there's 2 of them. All right, we're doing 2 webinars next week. What are they? I'm going to show you. And I hope you register for one or both of them, because we're closing in on the last of the 20 for 2020 series. But I want to show you here, webinars. That's under our educational webinars. I'll put this link in there as well. All right, so we've got today's. Next week, I'm going to go through that whole ICS Form 214, start to finish, what the form is, how to do it in our system, and then how to finish it up in Adobe Reader, which is really, really easy, even though it's another step. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the accreditation process. I'm hoping to have a guest speaker or two, a department that just got accredited and they were ER users. And then we'll do ISO. and then we're going to do an update. This might be a good one for Mike, because we're going to talk about our new data visualization. I want to make sure I got the name right. Yeah, it's Mike. We're going to talk a lot more about our business intelligence tool and the changes that are being made there. So last link coming your way, everybody, and then we'll call it a day. All right. We'll catch you next week, everybody.